pieces and parts of a covenant. But you can't do that. You can't do a convalidation, or you can't do the documentation route with less than 2 years between the time that they were married and the time that that action takes place. Okay? So yeah, people do that all the time. But if somebody goes and gets married on a beach somewhere, it's not considered a sacramental marriage because it lacks the church and the celebrant to witness their vows, witness the vows on the part of the church.
What if you have a minister outside of the church?
It depends on that minister. First of all, there isn't a bishop in the United States that will grant a dispensation from what we call canonical form, dispensation from the law, to allow for a wedding to take place outside of a church building, or what we call an oratory or a dedicated chapel. Okay, those three elements, I'll explain what those three elements are. They just won't give that permission except in extraordinary circumstances. We had one where both of the intended spouses had cerebral palsy, and they could not get out of their home, and so the marriage was performed inside the home. But they had to go through all of the preparation, and then the priest went to the home and performed the marriage in the home in front of witnesses and family that formed the congregation, and they did scripture, they did a homily, they did the entire sacrament, they celebrated Mass in the home, everything, in order for that marriage to take place in the home. Doesn't happen very often at all. So in fact, Bishop Sticka says don't even bring it unless you've got a nice explanation of why. Now, we're going to define a church in the terms of the Catholic Church as the church, okay? The church building, not the church, the group of the baptized, but the church building, the physical building. An oratory would be like Bishop Sticka was an ordained bishop at the Civic Center. That would be considered an oratory, but it has to be set up for the specific purpose of the reception of the sacrament. And then there is a dedicated chapel. I've done several weddings at Whitestone Chapel, which is down on Watts-Bar Lake, but it's inside the building, and it's a dedicated missionary chapel, and Bishop Sticka has given us permission to do it there. One of my children was married inside a Methodist church. Father Michael Cummins was the celebrant along with the Methodist minister, but Father Michael Cummins, when that happens, had to be the person that received their consent and witnessed their consent for the church. And of course there's no Mass when you do that, but there's certain rules that when you have it in another denominational church for some particular reason, then the priest or the deacon has to follow certain guidelines as to what their parts of the ceremony will be.
That's an ecumenical.
That would be for an ecumenical marriage. Yes?
Why is it that it has to be in a church or an oratory or basically that? And what is the underlying reason for?
Okay, a sacramental marriage is a liturgical act. It's therefore, it should be celebrated in the public liturgy of the church. That's right out of Canon Law, 1631. Marriage introduces one into an ecclesial order, an order of the church. So we have two states of life, actually three states of life at the church. One of them is holy orders, right? One of them is single, and one of them is married. So there's three ecclesial orders within the church. Since marriage introduces one into an ecclesial order and creates rights and duties within the church between the spouses and towards their children, then it becomes an ecclesial act. It has to be witnessed by the church, and the church in this case is the minister and the congregation. And the church building is the representation of that congregation when it's filled with people, even if they're just family and friends from New Jersey, or New York, or San Diego, doesn't matter, or the Philippines. Okay, so there has to be witnesses, and the witnesses have to be the community, and that collection is supposed to happen under the auspices of a sacrament within the church. The public character of the consent, or the I do, it protects the I do by having those visible witnesses that are members of the church.
And this witness is different than who signs the marriage.
Correct.
Because they don't have to necessarily, one of them doesn't necessarily have to be Catholic.
We push to have at least one of the witnesses be a confirmed practicing Catholic, but it doesn't have to be, as long as there is a priest or deacon that will receive the vows, receive the consent.
Since all of this has been established, has there been an increase in marriages in the Catholic Church, a decrease? Has it been steady,
Pretty steady.
pretty steady?
Yeah. We're seeing an overall decrease in marriage, period. So when I say steady, it's steady with regard to the population. But marriage, whether it's a Catholic marriage or a non-Catholic marriage or a civil marriage, in general has decreased. People are not getting married, they just choose to cohabitate. Which is something that the church just outright rejects.
It also explains one of the reasons why our birth rate of children born outside the marriage is skyrocketing.
Sure.
Deacon Tim, I'm still a little bit confused. The holy sacrifice of the Mass can be performed outdoors and over, where you can
With
have
permission,
communion.
you have to get permission from the bishop to do that. You can't just say, I'm gonna have mass outside.
Yeah, but it's,
You're allowed to do that, yes.
so, it doesn't have to be in a church building or anything like that. If
Ideally, it is. Again, you have to get permission from the bishop in order to celebrate mass outside. You have to get permission to have what we call a Eucharistic procession out of doors, where you bring the Eucharist outside of the church building itself. That has to be a written permission granted by the bishop.
So it's the same process as the marriage being, okay.
The bishop has an awful lot of requests then.
He does.
Does he have a, I'm serious, does he have a secretarial group or something that just gives a stamp approval?
He has a chancellor and two vice chancellors that they are chancellors of the law, of Canon Law, and their duty is to make sure that it maintains or falls within the guidelines of Canon Law, and they can make recommendations to the bishop or not. And the bishop usually gives them certain leeway in saying yes. You can say yes on these type of things and no on these kind of things as he goes through.
So they speak on his behalf then?
If you get a letter from the chancellor, you're probably really good. The only thing different is that if you don't get a favorable thing from the chancellor, you have the option of going to the bishop himself. So it's like once removed. It's very legalistic, and I'm sorry, but that's the way that the church is and has been for a very long time.
That's why in North Carolina and Charlotte, when the bishop marches, only he marches out of the church and does a procession around the blocks there.
Yeah, but I think it's okay for a local bishop to give permission to his priests and pastors to do that as well, but it has to be requested.
He always did it himself.
It has to be requested.
And with a little tent on top
Yep.
of him. Yeah.
Actually, in Poland, we have procession, especially in June, or,
Corpus Christi.
yes,
Mhm.
and it's through all the town, to the cathedral. And what about a priest or lay person going with Eucharistic to sick or lay person? They need also to have permission
Mhm.
every time.
Mhm. You can't have the Eucharist in your home without permission from the bishop. He'll write you a letter to give you that permission.
Tim, I'd like to back up to the focus group, especially since you're trained in that. Have you ever recommended to people, you might want to rethink the concept?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I have.
I mean, how many people have ignored you percentage-wise?
Several.
Yeah, a good percentage of them, is it?
Yeah.
Been there.
It's gonna change, we're in love.
But it's, let me tell you that it's really kind of revealing, because I'll get a couple that's like 19 and 18 that'll come in on January the 3rd. They got married on, or got engaged on Christmas Day after starting the college school semester in September. And they've decided that this is their life work, is to get married. And so we give them, we administer the focus inventory, and we sit down. And what comes back to us, first of all, is how they answered on every question, but a graph that goes from 0 to 100%. It's like a percentile, like when you were taking the TCAPs and that kind of stuff. And where do you fall? Well, somebody that has no track record with each other will fall 50% or below in how they agree with each other, how they agree with the church, and how many times they are uncertain in their answer. Couples that have been together for 9 months or a year know each other a lot better, and they score somewhere between 50 and 100. It just makes sense that they know each other that much better. We do get couples that come in and they're in like the 90 to 100 category on every single topic. And I sit there and we always ask, how did you guys meet? What did you do? This, that, and the other thing. And they have a long-standing tradition of marriage as an example. And they've gotten to know each other. There has been a proper courting period of time that they've gone through. That courting has included both sets of parents who have given them a good example of marriage in the home, being married for a number of years. Some of them are divorced and remarried, but they still have this example of marriage in the home. And you can actually tell the differences that you see when you first turn the first cover page over and you look at that graph. You know who you're going to be getting almost immediately. And then you focus your questions and you really zing them and say, okay, tell me, you answered this and you answered this. Why did you answer it that way? And then they're forced to confront each other on their answer. And that can be a rough thing for an 18 and 19-year-old to think that they're head over heels in love. They're still trying out the relationship. They have got no clue that they're going to be faced with those kind of things for their whole life, right? So, yeah, I have told couples, I think you ought to reconsider. And then they say, well, we don't want to. And I says, well, maybe you need to talk to Father Michael.
Oh.
So I pass it uphill. When Father David Carter was here, I'd say, you need to talk to Father David Carter. But, and then in that case, a lot of times they will go outside of the church and get married. But
Here, you're about to lose your jacket.
the idea is that we don't want to
Wiggling around.
encourage a marriage that we know is going to fail from the start.
Yeah, you don't believe in the true love.
I have a hard time with that. Yeah, when they have pet names for each other and they use them repeatedly.
Yeah, it's safer.
We didn't have a focus group, but I'm just glad Bernadette ignored the people told her not to.
Yeah. So I went, 43 years ago, I went through a similar program for my marriage preparation with Pauline. But we did it with a Benedictine monk, and they are very, very strong in their idea of what marriage is. That's one of the charisms of the Benedictine fathers, is this outreach to married couples. And a lot of the marriage preparation programs that you see are put together by the Benedictine fathers, or the Paulists, one of the two. So we went through a Benedictine program with a young priest, and he was very adamant in really pushing us to answer questions, but we dated for almost 3 years before we got married. So,
And I did just few months.
I'm sorry?
And I did just few months.
Mm-hmm.
And
And it worked.
it was.
That's great. You're the exception. Nowadays, you are the
No,
exception.
that's okay.
Just 40 years makes her an exception.
That's true too. Absolutely, that's true. Questions about this? That's what our preparation program looks like for the Diocese of Knoxville, and it's very typical across the United States. The U.S. bishops are getting closer and closer in their discussions about what marriage prep should look like.
I have a question, this preparation program, where it takes place?
This usually, the focus inventory,
No, the less.
Down here?
MVP, yes.
that usually happens at a hotel over a weekend.
Uh-huh.
That has a nice big sized conference area. Down in Chattanooga, they have, I think they have a building with an association with St. Jude's Church, that they'll do it there. But it's a place where they can get anywhere from 20 to 40 couples together, plus the team of couples that host the weekend. So it's in a place that's big enough to do that. And then, of course, they have to figure out how to bunk the girls together and bunk the guys together so that they're not buying, 80 rooms instead of just 40, whatever.
Yeah, it would be good to have this in smaller groups and in some monastery or some other more holy place than hotel where everything.
Unfortunately, that's true, and they do that in a lot of dioceses. But in the Diocese of Knoxville, we have no facilities like that. They just don't exist. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but we don't have a monastic order within the boundaries of our diocese. They don't exist. So they would have to go to Nashville in order to take advantage of that, or over to North Carolina or South Carolina, which is exterior to our diocese, and therefore the two bishops have to agree on the scope of the program because they're within their borders. So that's one. We don't have we have a retreat center, but it hasn't been developed yet, down in Benton, Tennessee, down off of the Hiawassee River. And eventually they'll be able to handle 40 to 60 couples down there, but they have a lot of construction to do before that gets into place. And they're working on it, but I picture that'll be about 3 to 5 years down the road. So we don't have the facilities to be able to do it.
And everything needs to be done in diocese quarters.
Sorry,
That's fine.
I wish it was, and we're getting there slowly as a diocese, but we've only been in existence for 26, 27 years.
Kind of a negative question, but after couples go through this, is there any statistic that shows that there's less divorce because of this?
Absolutely. And that comes under the why. Why do we do this? We have found that a couple that goes through active participation in a marriage preparation program in the Catholic Church is 600% less likely to get a divorce.
That's a lot.
It is a lot.
Is that a US statistic?
That is a U.S. statistic, and the proof of that statistic is that when a couple goes through a Catholic marriage preparation program, we can give them a certificate, and they take 50% of the cost of a marriage license away when they issue the marriage license, because they have been through active marriage preparation. And they never get taxes back, right?
There is a Catholic organization that set up divorce counseling. My friend Bill Crimmins, he's down in Lavalier or something like that, I can't remember their French name. And I started doing the same thing. And I would love to see the statistics of the number of people who have gone through that and how many of them finally went through divorce and how many didn't. And particularly the ones that had done this preparation and then gone through that in divorce. And I'll bet you it's amazing the amount of time it does. know, even the ones that are falling apart that are recaptured out of that 60% you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, I bet it's even higher.
Yeah, and you have to realize too that this is somewhat of a newer phenomenon.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking in this time frame, 1983 on, that it became a heavier focus, not just for marriage preparation. The 83, when the new or the revised code of canon law came out, made it mandatory on the pastor to prepare the members of his parish in all sacraments. And then, so they started looking at baptism prep, and then marriage prep, and then confirmation preparation, preparation for First Communion, preparation for reconciliation. So they had to come to grips with what that meant. And so it was actually out probably 87 to 90 before a lot of these programs started really drilling down in terms of what that looked like.
Do you know of any other mainline religions that have programs similar to this?
What we call the High Anglican Church does.
Episcopalian?
They're not Episcopal, it's basically Episcopal, but Episcopal is Anglican light. It's kind of like Catholic light is the Anglican Church, and then the Episcopal is the Anglican light, right? So it's the mainline Anglican Church. They're starting to come back around to this, but the mainline Anglican Church has got a lot of internal problems that they're going through right now. Not Anglican, Episcopal Church is having a lot of problems they're going through right now. But what we call the High Anglican Church, which is really the Church of England, they do really detailed marriage preparation. But they always follow what we do anyway. Other questions? Hey, we did pretty good.
Isn't it interesting how many questions already married people ask about the process of getting married?
I still ask.
She asks all the time, oh God, what have I done?
Well, over time, the questions change though, right? Man, how do I deal with my in-laws? How do I deal with my kids' in-laws? How do I deal with grandchildren and those kind of things? The questions always seem to change at different phases of where you're at. So, and you'd be surprised how many people will come and talk to the priests or the deacons and say, you know, I just don't understand where my kids are coming from. I haven't seen my grandkids in 2 years or 3 years, and I don't know what I did. There's just lots and lots of issues that go on because of marriage that just seem to change over time. The questions change. And how do you deal with that? And unfortunately, we can't get everybody to answer every question about marriage up front. And that's why the primary focus of teaching, first of all, when I open up that focus inventory, I can tell which couples are coming to me from a background of having a strong marriage model, of where the parents are actively involved with them in sacramental prep in conjunction with the parish, in conjunction with another church, where they actually actively work with one another and work with their kids by example over the course of their life. I'll sit there and I'll say, man, this is a great inventory. Tell me about your background. And we get to the questions about, I wish we settled our differences differently. And you agree or disagree with how, with that answer. And so you ask them, well, how did your parents settle differently? I never saw my parents fight. I never saw
have
one.
many problems with that. Actually, I believe you should go deeper, and it is all about the strength of the faith. Because in marriage,
Oh, yeah.
there are different moments in all these 40 years, and what actually keeps marriage is to be faithful.
Yes, and we do that.
And keep promises and remember it. So kids not necessarily see the happy marriage, or if they see some moments, they will know, oh, this is not good. I don't want this in my life, and I will try the better way. But the fact that the faith is strong and it actually keep going and keeping in right track. This.
Yes, and we
So
do,
if
we,
you see, good marriage of 40 years or whatever, there are a lot of stories behind.
oh gosh, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So the only thing is
Mhm.
actually how, not necessarily how often your kids see you praying or going to the church, but just
Where-
being,
Yeah,
where
that
and
faith
keep-
basis comes from. And we do talk about that quite a bit when, in the section of focus where we talk about the marriage covenant itself and the individual responsibilities for that covenant.
This is also what I want to say, that I hate statistics and I don't believe in statistics.
Just look at our last election, right?
And the thing is that statistics not necessarily are saying true, because each situation, people are coming from different backgrounds and they have different approach. The best example for wrong statistic is my daughter, who actually took this, when she started university, she took this strength test or whatever they call it. And they said, well, math and music is not your strongest thing. Well, she actually got master in statistics,
Mhm.
and she got a 4-year scholarship in music and graduate from graduate school. Just if she will listen to the statistics, she would be probably working in the crowd or whatever.
Yeah,
So statistics are not necessarily true if you apply the same, test to everybody. It has to be some variation.
right. Again, this is, let's talk about these answers. It's not a
Predictor of
It's not
Pass-fail.
a pass-fail, it's not a, well, you shouldn't get married because you answered this question incorrectly or whatever.
Yeah, make you aware that this is the field you have to work if you want to last.
Yeah, it's more of a focus on how do we get past some of those things that look like they might be a problem for you. And that's where that focus, that's why as a facilitator, you don't say, nope, you can't do this. What it is let's say somebody has no idea that 18% on a credit card will kill you financially. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't get married. What it means is they need to learn how to take care of their finances, right? They need to be able to answer some of those questions. Or are you aware of how much student debt loan you're bringing to the marriage on both sides?
Number one reason for divorce, money.
You know, and so you get them to actually, it's not to say you shouldn't get married, this isn't your vocation. What it is have you talked about this prior to the decision to get married? You know, to get engaged and want to get married. Have you talked to each other about how much student debt you're bringing into the marriage? How much credit card debt you're bringing into the marriage? How many jobs you've had in the last 6 months?
If you're lucky.
I'm sorry?
If you're lucky.
Yeah.
So,
Do you have any, in this parish or in this area, are there many same-sex couples that come to you and host that?
Never gotten one. Never gotten one. But it is prevalent. I haven't seen it in this parish. Mostly in the northeast and the northwest, we get an awful lot of, the church gets an awful lot of people approaching the church for same-sex marriage. And they're denied. There isn't a bishop in the United States that would allow that to
But it
happen.
would be a marvelous idea for them to go through this just like everybody else.
Sure.
The focus part of it, at least, for sure.
I have actually done marriage preparation for couples that have no intention of getting married in the Catholic Church.
I think it's
Just
a wonderful
because
idea.
they want to go through the preparation.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think that was very Catholic Christian of you.
I just believe in marriage. Okay, let's say a prayer and get out of here.
Because it's late.
Yeah, and I've got a mass to go to shortly. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. This week, we celebrated the Feast of Saint Scholastica. That was the name of the elementary school I went to in Detroit, run by the Benedictine Fathers. And it was really a neat place. And we had statues of Saint Scholastica all over the place. And I always thought that her name meant that you had to go to school. Anyway, let's do an Our Father, Hail Mary, and glory be in honor of, in memory of Saint Scholastica and her brother Benedict. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Hail Mary,
Full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Next week, see you next week.
Thank you.
We don't make it.